Hi guys, I have recently been asked about my workflow in Substance Painter and Maya on how to create texture sets to separate the textures. This can be useful when you have different parameters inside, for example, Unreal Engine or inside Maya itself, where things like glass has to be isolated out because it will be translucent and the other materials will be opaque. Um, for this example, I'm just going to give two texture sets, one for the main part of the door and the other for the hinges. And I'm also going to show you how to bake down the high resolution mesh. And this high resolution mesh is here. So we'll bake the normals into one texture set, and this will leave the other texture set without the normals. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. The first thing we have to do is set up our texture sets. Now this has already been UV unwrapped, so I don't have to go through this process. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to set up our materials. If you go to the Hypershade window, and this is just a material editor, and you can see I've set up a metal material. Now this is just a basic Lambert. Sorry. Yeah, this is just a basic Lambert, so just dragged in a Lambert. And I've also set up a wood material, which is right here. And I gave it a brown colour. Okay? So I have wood and I have metal. So if I close that down, I want to just click on the faces, select this object, assign existing material, and I want this to be wood. Okay? Now then, we want to select all our hinges, like so. And right click, assign existing material, metal. So you now have different materials. Now if we click this, we can then file, export selection, and I'm just going to create a new folder on my desktop. We'll call it tutorial. And this is our door low poly. Okay. Everything should be fine. You may want smoothing groups on, but the default should be fine. I've just unchecked animation because the door doesn't animate, and cameras, lights, audio, everything else. Everything should work now. So if I export selection, okay, then I want to bring back my high resolution mesh and hide my low resolution mesh. And for this I'm just going to export out. And I'll call this door high poly. Okay. I open up Substance Painter, go File, New, and we want to select the mesh from our desktop tutorial, and it's the low poly mesh. Okay. Now from here we can select the resolution. I'm just going to keep it at 1K just now, and press OK, and you can see your door opens up. This is fine. And you can also see we have our two texture sets on the top right. Okay, if you can't see this, you can find it up here under Views, Texture Set List. Okay, so for the first texture, we have the metal. I'm just going to grab a smart material, and I think I will use this medieval stylized, and just get rid of that. Okay, let's zoom in. Now as you can see, the medieval stylized doesn't work, and the reason for that is we don't have a curvature map. Now to get a curvature map, we can bake down our low poly mesh. But first we want the high poly detail for our wood. So let's go to the wood, and let's drag in a texture. Let's check this stylized texture here, and delete that. And from here, if we scroll down, we have bake textures. And I'll just set this to 1K. And if you click this little page here, we can then import our high poly for texture baking. Okay. Now you'll want to uncheck average normals, because this takes an average normal and gives you a border, which is really messy. So let's uncheck average normals and head down to bake wood textures. And this will only bake the texture onto one texture set. Okay, so now as you can see we have our basic normals in place, but I think I want the normals to come out a little bit more, so I'm going to increase the cage. So to do that I'm going to back into bake textures and increase the cage to 0.05 by 0.05 and bake the wood texture. And as you can see, that has given us a slightly deeper bake for our normals. Now you may want to increase this even more. This will be entirely up to yourself. I'm going to increase it to 0.1 maybe, by 0.1. Okay, and that is a good enough bake for me. And now for our metal, because we have these hinges only on our low poly mesh, we're going to bake our low poly mesh again. So let's take this, delete it, and bring in our door low poly. And this will get our curvature map if we bake down. Okay, now if we zoom into the texture, we can see we have some form of wear here now. If we click the edge for generator, take the wear down, you see we can adjust the wear to suit what we need. And this is based off our curvature map. Okay, so let's just double check that on all our texture sets. Okay, that looks fine. And that also looks fine. Okay. So now we have to fix our wood. We go to our wood, and we have the texture here. We need some textures to go up and down. Okay. So let's duplicate this, add a mask, and let's actually add a white mask. Go to fibers and just rotate this back to 0. Now we only want to mask off the specific areas, so let's add a, let's actually just start masking off the areas here. So we don't want the top. If we go to our alpha and delete it, it gives us a nice sharp edge. If you press tab, you can zoom in and click this button up here. You can go to orthographic view, and by rotating you can then hold shift and snap to the axis, and control right mouse button and move increases the brush, and we can just click, shift, drag and click, and it masks it off. Okay, and let's do the bottom one. If we increase our brush a little bit, we want to click, drag with shift and click. Okay, and we also need this part and this part. So let's do the middle part first. Just adjust our brush click, drag with shift and click. Okay, it's starting to look a bit better. Now we have to do this. If we hold our control, right mouse and move up and down, you can see the brush gets bigger. If you hit control and left mouse, you can rotate the brush. Okay, let's zoom in a little. To rotate a little bit more and increase our brush size. Okay, now you can take a lot more time with this. And we then just make our brush size a little bit smaller and finish this off, like so. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned is the symmetry, because as you can see, it doesn't change on the other side. So if I turn symmetry on, you can see this here. So I'll actually leave this until we're doing the diagonal. So you can obviously mask out this area as well. I'm just going to leave it for now for time purposes. Now we can click this and duplicate another and just black that out. Let's actually white it out first. Grab the fibres and rotate them until they line up with the diagonal posts. Okay, and now set a black mask, scroll down, if you select grayscale and make sure it's set to white. Okay, let's tab to go full screen, control left and drag to rotate. Okay, and just mask off this area, like so. And then zoom in, make the brush size smaller, and paint in the extra detail. Okay. Now you will want to do this with symmetry on, and obviously finish off the rest of it. I'll just show you what symmetry does just now by using a tool. So if I go to a tool and I head up to the top and add a layer, it's just a blank layer, and if you use the screw bolt tool and just zoom in, make this a little bit smaller, and just, if we head up to the top here, add symmetry. Now you can see the symmetry is in the x-axis. If you click here, you can select the axis. We want it in the z, so that it duplicates on the back. And if we add our screws, sorry, we have to be in our other layer, so let's remove that layer and head over to our metal texture set, then add the new layer. So this is a blank layer, add our bolts, our screws, like so. Okay. And when we rotate, you can see it has duplicated the actions on the other side. Okay, so that is a symmetry. Now for exporting your mesh, let's just turn off Symmetry. If we head over to File, Export Textures, you can see we have two texture sets. Okay? Now you can specify the resolution for each. For example, the metal is very small, so I may only want maybe 256 by 256. And the wood, maybe I want more detail, so I'll export out a 2K map. Now this is where you export your parameters, export the source. So desktop, folder, textures, okay. And if you select this drop down for config, you have all your different places that you can export to. So for example, you can export to Unreal Engine 4 and it'll be a packed, and what that gives you is your base color, your RMA map, so your occlusion, roughness and ambient occlusion, and metal, sorry, and your normal map and emissive, and again for your wood. Now if you're exporting for, say, V-Ray, you have it here. It then gives you reflection, glossiness, IOR, etc, etc, and this will export out two separate maps. Okay, so if you were using Arnold, that is here, you have AI standard, you also have UDIMs. So for this I'm just going to use AI standard for Arnold 5. Gives you all these maps. Export. And if you open the folder, you can see you now have all of your maps. So these maps here can be seen to be the door low poly metal, and these maps are your door low poly wood. Okay, now you can then take these into Maya or any other program. For this I'll just show you in Maya. If we head over to Maya, open up the material editor, the hypershade. I'll use the metallic one first, so the metal. Let's go to color, file, and the file. So on our desktop, tutorial, actually it's textures, and base color. Okay, and you just add in all your maps. You could then right click, bring up the wood, color, file, and then load in our wood base color. Press OK. If you bring up the low poly again, we have our texture. And that is it. So thank you for joining us, I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you again.